So with matrices, there's going to be three we're going to call it row operations that we're allowed to do. Three things that we're allowed to do with these matrices. It won't necessarily be apparent why we'd want to do these at the beginning, but these are things that we're allowed to do that don't change the value of of the matrix. So the first thing that we're allowed to do is that we're allowed to interchange any two rows. I'll show you an example of this here in a sec. This means you're allowed to change the order of the rows. You can move row 3 up to row 1, row 1 down to row 2 if we want to. We're allowed to change the order of the rows, and it won't affect our matrix. So we'll just do a little easy basic one to show you this. So here's a matrix. This is an augmented matrix, just meaning you have like coefficients and answers. Rule 2 by 2. Envision this represents like a 2 by 2 system. So what we're allowed to do is change these positions. So we can rewrite this as -1, 7, 0, 2, 3, 5. And it doesn't change the value of the matrix anyway. Now, again, it might not make sense why we'd actually want to do this at this point. But if you think about this in terms of equations, so let's think of this, if I were to write this as an equation, 2x plus 3y equals 5, and -x plus 7y equals 0. So that's taking the first one. And if I were to just switch these, -x plus 7y equals 0, and 2x plus 3y equals 5. Have I changed the value of these equations in any way? Just change the order that I wrote them. Okay. So that's why we're allowed to do this. It doesn't change anything, so that's okay. We're allowed to do that. The next thing that we're allowed to do with matrices is we can multiply or divide them by any constant, except for 0. So we can multiply or divide any row by a constant, except we just can't multiply by 0 because that will eliminate the So let me show you a little example here. Here's our matrix. And with this first row, we're going to be doing something in just a minute where with this first number, we're going to try to change that to a 1. Okay. So we're going to multiply or divide. You can think of it either way. Multiply and dividing are the same thing, really. What's something that we can either multiply this by or divide it by to make that a 1? Yeah, divided by 2, right? So dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by a half. So we're going to one of the things times a half, same thing as dividing by 2. If I were to multiply this whole row, I got to do the whole row though by a half. We're going to get 1 half. And this is actually still 0. The rest of it stays the same. I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to multiply a row or divide, same thing, by any constant. I just can't do it multiply by 0. And it doesn't necessarily make sense why we want to do this yet. But just know this is something you're allowed to do. It doesn't change the answer. Okay, and the last one, this is going to be the most complicated one. We're going to be using it probably the most, though. We're allowed to replace a row by adding or subtracting a multiple of any other row. And this is mostly what we're going to be doing today. Replacing the row by adding or subtracting a multiple of any other row. Yeah, don't worry about why we're doing this yet, because we're allowed to do that. So she'll take what I'm in here. Another thing that we're going to be trying to do, let's say we want to change that number. We want to try to make that 0. We want to put a 0 there instead of 3. So we got to figure out some sort of operation that we can make that number 0. Right? Now these first two things aren't going to work if we change the rows, or just change them to be a 1 or the help. And if you multiply or divide by any constant, you're never going to get 0. The only way you can get 0 is to multiply by 0. We're not allowed to do that. So the only other option is this. We're going to replace it by adding or subtracting the multiple of another row. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to multiply this top row. It's going to look like this. Let's go to the notation here a sec. We're going to say row 2 is, now if we're going to add these two rows together, what would I need to multiply this row by in order to make that 0? -3, yeah. So if I multiply this row by -3, and then I add it to this row, and then I have -3 plus +3. So -3 R1 plus R2. This is the notation we're going to use. Don't worry if you're confused. We're going to do a lot more explaining of this. But this is what it would look like. We're allowed to multiply any other row by multiple, and then add or subtract them. So what's going to end up happening? This row stays the same. We multiply this by -3 and add it to that, and we get 0. Multiply this by -3, -15, add it to that, and we get -11. Multiply this by -3, -21, add it to that, and we get -52. So that's what I did, but again, I'm going to explain that a lot more. That's the third operation we're allowed to do. We're allowed to replace the row, so we replace the second row by adding or subtracting. We added a multiple of another row. We added a multiple of row 2. This is where it gets confusing. All right, just hang in there. Okay, so the goal in doing this, you can see what I did is we changed this was a 1, and this to a 0. We're trying to write these things in what's called a row echelon form. And so that's going to be the next thing, and then we'll do some problems, is what row echelon form is. This is going to be our goal for today, is to write matrices in this form. And today you're going to kind of be like walked through how to get there. This is what row echelon form looks like. Don't worry about the letters because they just represent numbers. But row echelon form, notice there's 1s here, and then these are 0s. So these are 1s, and then these are 0s. So row echelon form, this means that the diagonals are 1, diagonal here, diagonal, is 1s, and then there's 0s to the left of that. That's what we're going to be trying to achieve today and tomorrow, and Monday too. So our goal is to try to make these numbers 1s and these numbers 0s. If we've done that, that's called a row echelon form. So keep in mind that's our goal in all these problems, to get it to look like that. 1s, always going to kind of start up here and sort of work our way down. Start at the top and work our way down. So 1's on the diagonal and then 0's to the left of that. In all the problems today, either I'm going to tell you or the book is going to tell you what operation to do. So you're not going to have to come up with these operations. Eventually, tomorrow and Monday, you will. Today, you're going to be told what to do. So you don't really need to write down the directions, just write down the problem there. All right, so I'm going to tell you the row operation to do, and then we're going to do it. So you'll notice that this already has a 1 here, right? So that's already good. The next thing that we're going to try to do is try to turn this 4 into a 0. We want that to be a 0. So how we're going to get there, I'm going to tell you now, is we're going to say R2, we use a capital R. This kind of means like the new row 2. R2 means like the new row 2. It's going to equal. Anybody think they know what to do? Yeah? Good. Negative 4 times R1 plus then the lowercase r means like the original R2. So big R2 is going to be negative 4R1 plus R2. Now, some of you could probably do this in your head and just add it. I'm going to write out the whole step just so you can see what's happening here. The top row we're not changing. This just says this is the only row we're going to change. We're only changing row 2. So the top row I'm going to leave some space in though because we're going to be writing some more. We're only going to change row 2. Nothing's going to happen to row 1. We're going to use this little equation. Negative 4 times R1, so negative 4. The R1 value in this column is 1. Plus the original R2, so plus 4. So this is R2 and this is R1. And we have to do this for every single element in that row. So we're going to do the same thing for the next one. Negative 4 times R1, so that's times 2, plus the original R2 value, which is negative 1. Same for the last one. Negative 4 times the R1 value, which is 3, plus the original R2 value of 2. So that's that row operation. Now if we just simplify, let's keep the top row. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0, which is what we're trying to do. Negative 8 plus negative 1 is negative 9. And then negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10. So that's going to be our first one. The next one that you're going to do, the last thing we need to do is try to turn this one to a 1. And then it'll be in row echelon form. Because we'll have 1 on the main diagonal and then 0 to the left. So this is just a 2 by 2, so it's a little easier. But we want to change this to a 1 now. Make that a 1. So what should be my next one that I do? I'm not going to make that a 1. Yeah, divide by negative 9, just divide by whatever it is. The way that we write that is just negative 1/9 R2. So that means we're just going to multiply R2 by negative 1/9. Same thing as divided by negative 9. So it's just multiplying by the reciprocal, that'll give us 1. So we keep the top row. And again, if you want to do this in your head, that's fine. But we're going to do everything times negative 1/9. So 0 times negative 1/9. Negative 9 times negative 1/9. And negative 10 times negative 1/9. And then our new matrix, we're going to keep the top row. 0 times anything is 0. So that's why we changed this one to a 0 first. 0 doing a 0. Negative 9 times negative 1/9 turns out to be 1. And then negative 10 times negative 1/9 just becomes 10/9. Negative same thing. So we're done. That's row echelon for you. And then tomorrow we'll talk about what we do from here. You actually are going to then solve the equation. But today we're just going to write it in that form. We got 1 on this main diagonal here, and that is it. And at most today you're going to do 2 operations at most. Let's try this one. And again, I'll tell you the operations to do, just like your book's going to tell you what operations to do. Anybody think of what operation you want to do here? Okay, well, we want to times actually the top row by something to get rid of the 3, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I want to make that a 0. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the only thing is, like, we can't multiply 3 by something to get 0. So the only option then is to multiply the top row by something and then add it to this one. So if we're going to get rid of this, make this 0, we need whatever we add it to be negative 3, right? So we're going to multiply the top row by negative 3. So we're going to say R2 equals negative 3 R1 plus little r2. And you don't have to come up with that yet today. So let's do this. I'm going to still write it out. Eventually, we don't have to write out it. So top row stays the same. We're not doing anything because all we're doing is row 2. So we do negative 3 times the row 1 value. The row 1 value is here, over there. Negative 3 times 1 plus the original R2 plus 3. We have to do it for all of them. So we do negative 3 times this value up here, negative 2, plus the original R2 value, negative 5. Same with the last one there. Negative 3 times the original R1, which is 2, plus the original R2, which is 9. Everybody okay with that step? What we're doing? So keep the top row. This should be 0. That's the reason we did it. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And this becomes 6 plus negative 5. What's that? Mm-hmm. Yep. And then this is negative 6 plus 9. So we're actually done there because we got it in row echelon form. In the process of making this 0, it actually changed that one to 1 as well. Okay. So that's row echelon form. Now we're going to try a couple 3 by 3 ones where it gets a little bit more challenging. We'll throw in a third row. Add another layer of numbers in there. It's a lot more confusing. Get some more water. And then think about if anybody has a good idea for what our first operation should be. You write that down. Huh? Make the 3 a 0. So we always want to try to like start from the top and work our way down. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Nice. So notice this middle row already has a 1 in this position. We're allowed to switch rows, so we can just swap that for the top one. That'll be the easiest thing to do to get that first 1 1 to be 1. Nice. Just gonna move that up. So we're just gonna write it this way. Big R1 is going to equal this little R2. We're just going to move it up. So we're just going to rewrite it. All 1s across. And then we got to put the other one here. Nice. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is try to make this one a 0. That to be a 0. So it's kind of the same set of steps, yeah.
We want to make the bottom so that every time you
Move the middle one to the bottom.
because if you have the minus 2 plus, then it becomes 0 sometimes.
Okay, so we'll do that afterwards, yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. I know, I get you're thinking ahead. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So, but what do you want to multiply it by?
Maybe
Good. So we're going to do now R2. That's one we're changing. So whatever one we're changing is always the one that we start with the big R. We're changing the row 2 now. So we need this to get canceled out. So we're going to multiply this by -2 and add it. So -2 R1 plus R2. So our top row stays the same. It's not the only thing we're changing is row 2 on this one. Let's do part of this one. All right, here. So we're going to do -2 times row 1. So -2 times 1 plus the original row 2. So what does that equal? This here? 0, right? And this one, -2 times 1 is -2. -2 plus 2 is also 0. This is what Trevor was talking about. Then we do -2 times 1 is -2. Add it to 0, -2 plus 0, -2. And then the last one, -2 times 1 is -2 plus 6, so what should we see? Good. And then we'll just keep the other row the same. Yeah. And then Trevor noticed after, like as he was thinking about this one, how this one has double zeros. So what we're actually going to do next is we can then just go ahead and move this row down here because we want the double zeros for that one. So we can go ahead and move it down. So we're going to swap that one. So I'm going to write this as row 3 equals row 2. The most operations you'll have to do today is just 2 operations. So this is getting a little bit confusing, don't worry. We'll build our way up. We're going to keep the top row. We're going to swap these 2. Some of these can get pretty long. Let me do them all. All right, what do we want to do next? We got really actually 3 more. Okay, you can do that. You can go ahead and do that if you wanted to. Generally, what you try to do is just work from like the top down. Yeah, if you wanted to go ahead and divide by -2, that's fine. But I'm just going to do it in the order that kind of we want to learn it as we go. So we're gonna go and change this one first. Good. Yep. So we're gonna do R2 equals -3 times R1. And then multiply this by -3 and add it to this one. Plus R2. So then the next one, the top row. So -3 times 1 is -3. -3 plus 3 is 0. -3 times 1 is -3. Add 4 to this 1, right? -3 times 1 plus -3. What's that equal? -4. -3 times 1 is -3 plus 13. Good. And we'll keep the bottom row. Alright, so we're almost done. Got one more to do. Yeah. So we got all these three. What? Yeah. Yep. So the last thing we need to do is make this a 1. So to change things to 1, you're going to multiply them by something. If we need to change them to a 0, we multiply another row and add it to it. So our last thing is going to be row 3 equals, and then we multiply this by the reciprocal of that. So -1/2, row 3. The last one. Here. Right now, anything with a 0 is going to say 0. The 0 times -1/2 is 0. 0 times -1/2 is 0. -2 times -1/2 gives us 1, which we're trying to get. And 4 times -1/2 is -2. So then we've got it into the row echelon form. Good question. So at the end of it, we'll talk about this more tomorrow. But if you envision this as a set of equations, if I were to now write it as an equation, x plus y plus z equals 1. This would just be y minus 4z equals 10. And this one would be z equals -2. Yeah, so now we have to solve for z. We plug that in there to get y. And then we find those and plug those into there to x. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's all we're going to do for today. I'm going to give you a few easier ones to try tonight. I'm going to give you 2 of the 2x2s, which should be pretty straightforward and simple, and then 1 of the 3x3s, just to try it. Try your best. You're not going to do all the problems I have listed here. We're actually just going to do up to 21. So shouldn't take you long. So we're going to try this basic thing. There's only like 4 total operations you have to do. And we're going to continue to practice this more tomorrow. Give you a few minutes to try to do those. 19 and 21. And I'll pull it up here to show you too. So you're going to just do these 3. So the first one, all you have to do is just this 1 row operation. You're going to multiply this one by -2 and add it. And you should get it in row echelon. That'll put it in row echelon 1. Same with this one, there's only 1 operation you have to do. And then this one has 2 of them. So it'll be a little bit more challenging. But I want you to try those 3, and then tomorrow we'll